Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis Gianoutsos. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
I don't have a conventional background, I guess, from a sustainability perspective. I am a retired engineer. That's where I did cut my teeth coming out of undergrad. Worked in aerospace for over a dozen years and then went into the retail industry. That's where I started my sustainability career. And then now leading sustainability as the chief sustainability officer here at Genesys. So it's been a beautiful transition of purposeful pivots to get me to where I am today, and which is why I love working on work that absolutely allows me to extend my focus on having those purposeful pivots.
I don't know about you listeners, but I just wrote down that note, those words, purposeful pivots. That's awesome. I love what you just shared there. Now, Bridgette, people are thinking about Genesys. What is Genesys? Because this is global, this podcast. When you say Genesys, what does Genesys do?
Yes, Genesys with a Y, right? Our technology powers how organizations connect with their consumers. From the call center to sales to marketing, we turn transactional, fragmented customer touch points into connected, holistic experiences that allow customers and consumers to feel seen, heard, and understood. Our goal here at Genesys is to help organizations create customer connections in impersonal world. So leading through experience orchestration led by empathy is what and who we are at Genesys.
Very good. Very good. Excellent. We've got a whole lot of questions for you now, but your background, so where you're living, great place, the US, wonderful. And I see that also you talked about retail, but you've been in organizations that do a lot of retail, food and things like that as well in the past, which has been good. And so the thing I'm really quite keen to learn from you is, how did you actually get into leadership?
Yeah. I started in leadership technically quite early in my career when I was in aerospace. I was leading the operations and supply chain for the facility that I worked at when I was a contractor at NASA. And I was managing a team of engineers that supported our Mars lander rover operations that we were doing there. And as a young engineer, struck out to me was I had such a diverse team, demographically, racially. But the big thing was when you're a young engineer, especially a young woman leading older gentlemen, is how do you really get them to be on your team, to want to know that they can trust your leadership, especially if you are dealing with technicians and you haven't had the tenure that they have, building and doing the things that they've done for multiple years, coming in as an engineer with your degree and just saying, hey, here's my knowledge and here's what I know. It really pushed me to figure out how to lead with an influential lens, to build trust, 3, to listen before talking, and to learn from my team. I needed to be able to absolutely understand their perspective and where they were coming from. While it was difficult at first because you're trying to figure out how do you manage all these different variables, really did help me to make sure that I was trying to be a leader that had a lot of breadth and depth, not just coming in with a position and a thought, but making sure that I was as well versed as I possibly could be so that I could not just lead, but follow also.
That's great. Wow. I've got so many questions I want to ask you right now in relation to what you just shared. And that is, as a young woman coming in and then leading a team of older men and so forth, that whole transition. Now, you talked about listening before talking, understanding the team. You wanted to become that leader of depth and breadth. And I'm going to come back to that actually last piece. But what was the transition? What was that like for you to come in as that young lady, young woman, young person coming into that role where you've got actually people who are more experienced, who've done this, been there, and then they're like, who's this? What was the transition like for you? But also, what was it like for them?
Yeah. I think what was lucky for me is that I had been there for a year or two. So it's not that I was coming in cold. They knew who I was. I think it's harder if you're coming in cold and they don't even know who you are. So they knew who I was. They felt it So I was not having to build relationships per se. You still have to build those relationships as you're going in. But when I looked at it from their perspective, which is what I wanted to do, is how would I feel if I was someone had spent 20 years working in aerospace and had this young person coming in? How would I feel? And even 20 years ago, as you could imagine, being a woman in that field was very unusual. It was not a norm. And I think, for them, they want it to be, I think some want it to be respectful. Most want it to be respectful and try to make sure that I learned as much as I could so that I could be successful. There were some who really struggled, I think, with that dynamic, honestly. And it was clear and evident that they struggled with that dynamic. For myself, I had to figure out how to not internalize the conflict that others might have, because there was nothing I could do about being Black or a woman every day I woke up. It was just going to be who I was. And it was hard at first to not internalize it, to not carry it as this burden, or to carry it as a chip on my shoulder, because you can become angry when people mistreat you or don't give you a fair chance. But I think it was also it was a chance for me to really sow into some relationships I had with my mentors, I had leaders at that time that really supported me and wanted me to be successful. And that was helpful for me to have that support so that I felt like I wasn't on an island by myself. And then some trusted colleagues that helped me to navigate those waters. But sooner than later, I was able to, the few that were the noise were silenced by the many that we were able to make great progress with.
That's a wonderful way of hearing it and taking us through that journey. When you said you try to not internalize it, what were you doing to not internalize it? What kind of things did you use? And I know that you said that you had some strong leadership mentors around you. You had some trusted colleagues as well. And so I think it's really important to make sure you've got like an inner circle around you to help you.
Yeah.
The question is, what else did you do between, the way I say it, Bridgette, is between your ears, right? It's what's going on in your mind and the mindset. What did you do to help that?
I will say prayer is a big part of it at that time, because it was, I think one of the things that prepared me is because I was an engineer and it's such a male dominated at that time space that you're just so used to it. And I'm also a daughter of a military man. So I was used to these scenarios where I might be one of the only. And so I had already had a little bit of resilience built within me that was hardwired within me as being the one and only of so many other opportunities in my life that, for different reasons, the only woman, the only Black, the only woman and Black, you just come up with these things where you figure out how to try to be as resilient as you possibly can be. This was just another one that was going to be added to it. And there were some days where they were extremely difficult, where there wasn't enough prayer, tears, or talking that was going to resolve the conflict. But you just try to stay steadfast, because you know that your talent is enough to be in the position that you're in.
Yeah, I think I'm a serial entrepreneur. I have been growing businesses these last dozen or so years in the gig economy. And my latest venture is Movo, which is an HR platform for the frontline workforce.
Awesome. Movo, what a cool name.
Thanks.
Where did that name come from?
A lot of ideation. It was important to us to keep it short and sweet. And I think with that type of technology made up startup name, it gives you a lot of room to put into the brand what you want the company to be. They are blank slates. And that was really the approach we wanted. And there are some things in there, mobility, vocation, these kinds of things that are very much tied to the future of work.
And is your organization mainly in the US, or is it elsewhere as well?
We're fairly global for an early stage company. We are doing business in Latin America, Eastern Europe, as far east as Turkey, and quite a bit in the US as well.
Very good. And tell me, so we're talking about leadership today. We're going to be talking about it through the lens of leaders at first, and then we'll change lenses later on. But the first question I've got for you is, how did you get into leadership?
I got into leadership through early job experiences. And I think largely in the way that a lot of people do, a little serendipitously, where I was responsible for a function or a piece of a business and needed to step in to make sure that things went well.
Yep. And what was that like for you, that experience of having to step in to make sure things went well?
A little scary at first. I'd say close to stage fright or that sort of butterflies feeling when you're about to perform in a very new way in front of a lot of folks. I think the business experience, I was a musician as a kid as well. I played in a lot of different groups. And I think that experience is similar, that initial feeling.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are listening to this episode as well. They probably go through that too. I think it's a good thing though when you get that nerves, right? That sort of helps you. One is because you do care about it going well, and two would be that it's just a great thing and it just gets the blood flowing. Because if it wasn't there, then it'd probably be pretty flat.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good thing. How did you cope in the sense that were you given training? Were you developed as a leader, or were you just thrown into the deep end?
A little bit of both. My own personal background is I came up poor with a single mom, a 16-year-old single mom. And I think I just had a lot of work experience very early on for probably most people's standards. And part of that is it can be you're sort of left to your own devices. It depends on, I think a lot of times too, when you're coming up and you're working an entry-level job or a relatively junior job, your immediate supervisor is pretty junior. And I think that leads a lot of people when they get those first leadership experiences to not have a lot of supervision and need to figure out quite a few things on their own. I'd say I had one extremely robust sort of mentorship program, more structured program early on. And that was my college years. I worked all through college, graduate school. And I had a wonderful kind of ad hoc apprentice program that a company put together for me when I was in college, summers during college, and the work that I did for them during the school year. And that really helped. They got me exposure to some more senior level folks and some international business exposure and a lot of things that I learned during those years, and really more structured, more support than anything I had seen at that point.
And it's wonderful when you do have that opportunity because, as you said, the structure and so forth and support, but also the access to various people who have been there, done that, successful. Hopefully they're successful in what they've done. But of course, they've probably learned a lot as well. So it just means you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of people that don't actually have exposure to that. And was there anything else you might have done as well outside of that mentorship program? Anything you did personally to try and help you develop as a leader?
I had just a lot of interests, and I thought a lot of leadership experiences that weren't particularly business experiences. I was leader in the Boy Scouts. I was leader in sports at school, team captain, team co-captain, those kinds of experiences. So I think a lot of those experiences are 100% relevant for the business world, and those same skills really carry over.
Yeah, cool. So there were things there already. So you did have that kind of experience as well. Yeah, that's really good.
Oh, I was just going to say, the only thing I would add, Dennis, is I think growing up poor, for those who are out there that maybe come from modest means as well, I think one of the hardest things when you're first starting out too is may not necessarily have much of a support network. And particularly if you're growing up, as I did in a rural part of the world, that can be really hard. So it really is super important to get that support, to find that support, to reach out. I made my early mentorship experiences were all folks that I had worked really hard to network with. I heard back in the day, I'd written them a cold letter saying I really wanted to work for them. And these were the things I thought I could learn. And those kinds of things definitely work.
Oh, nice. So there it is, listeners. There's an example, maybe writing a cold letter, as Jason's just called it, or a letter that you can send out to people saying, hey, quite keen to come and work here for you or with the organization. Because a lot of people tend to nowadays, Jason, wait for opportunities to come to them. Or they will they'll apply online for a job and they sit there with their arms folded, looking intensely at their screen, waiting for that job to say, ta-da, congratulations, you've got the job. A, it doesn't work like that. And B, you just got to get out there and do it. But I think it's a great opportunity for people to do that, is actually apply or just send them a letter just to build relationships with people, to say, hi, I'm quite keen. And it'd be quite cool to see where that goes for some people. So listeners, give it a go. And Jason will say that it does work, and it does. And why not? So yeah, it'd be pretty cool.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.